Hello. This is such a big stage, a big room. But that song, just out of curiosity, has anybody ever heard it before? Nope. So I just want to give a shout out to this band. This is 2/3 Goat. They're a local bluegrass country band based in New York City, but their artists come from the deep hills and hollers of eastern Kentucky, and their families have been struggling with mining for centuries. And that song means a lot to me because if it keeps going on, the next verse is, what will you do? What will you put your body on the line for? To protect our water, to protect our future, to protect our communities. And this is what my entire career has been, risking myself, putting my body on the line to protect what our communities rightfully deserve. And today is not an easy day for me to be up here in front of you all. Our community actually just got some pretty devastating news, and we're all in a pretty vulnerable state. So I'm asking you all to kind of go through this process with me right now to get a little bit of a feel or an experience of what my community, which is actually just south of here in the rural Coalfields, is experiencing at the moment. So if you feel comfortable, I really want you to close your eyes. And kind of what Liz did before, I want you to think about that place to you that's important, that place that helped shape who you are, that place that you're super excited to take your kids or grandkids or future kids to. And how does it feel when you're at that place? Like, what does your gut feel like? What's your heart? What emotions are radiating through your body? And now I want you to think about what it would feel like if all of a sudden that place that's so important to you and who you are is proposed to be destroyed for private profits from a corporation. What would you do? What risk would you take? What efforts would you put forward to protect that place? And think about and imagine that you built community resistance. You built connectivity between a place that has intentionally been disconnected by the coal industry or by some other corporation. And you've fought so hard for a decade to protect these places. And just sit with that. Think about how that feels. Now think about that you lost it, that you found out this week that place you're protecting is gonna be destroyed on Friday. How does that feel? How do you sit with that? That's exactly what is happening right now in our community. And so it takes a lot of strength for me to be up here today. This actually wasn't even part of my planned presentation, but I was like, I can't not be real with this room in this moment. And I think so often we're afraid to talk about our feelings. We're afraid to talk about what our real struggles are on a day-to-day basis for fear of being perceived weak or emotional. Women often get that. Don't be emotional. But that's actually what's going to take us into the future moving forward. And so and I also just want to, reflect for there are folks in the room that come from poverty, that are Black or brown, that are women. And if you're not one of those people, when you talk to those folks, I want you to think every day those people are struggling with 20 different things in any given hour that they're trying to manage and move forward. And the fact that we're here, that we show up, that we fight, that's our resistance. That's our fight for survival. And so I wanted to help give folks a little bit of picture of what is happening a couple 50 miles south of Pittsburgh. But first, I just want to show of hands how many people currently live in or previously lived in rural communities. How many, hold your hand up high still, if that rural community was a coal field, a shale field, the front lines of any type of fossil fuel extraction? Yeah, you're my people. So what we see here on the slide right now is what is the largest underground mining facility in the country. The company says in the world, but sometimes I don't believe the company. And so this picture is really it is foreshadowing. There's a cemetery, there's this giant preparation plant sitting behind it. I grew up over the hill from this facility. This is massive waste dumps, toxic valley fills that this same coal company displaced and pollutes right over the hill from I grew up, from where my neighbors live. These ponds are laced with toxic heavy metals, arsenic, lead, mercury. We all know what that does to our children when they're consuming that. But not only do we have coal in our communities, we're dotted all over the place with hydraulic fracturing, infrastructure, different pipelines, compressor stations. We're now being proposed to be the next Gulf South petrochemical hub build-out in the Ohio River Valley. That doesn't really sound sustainable to me. I don't know about you. This is actually a map of Greene County. And so what you're seeing on here is all of the longwall mines, all of the shale gas operations, and just how dotted it is. And we give tours all the time, and the first question we always get is also like, where do the people live? And we're like, right above this stuff, right on it. And in our communities culturally, the fossil fuel industry is controlling everything. And so even if people challenge the coal industry, they get bullied, they get ostracized. Sometimes there are like real threats on their life. If you're working in certain fields, you just get fired and you lose your ability to survive. And at the same time, the same industry, the gas, oil, coal, is dominating our economy. So they're forcing our communities, our members, to choose between their health or their ability to feed their families. And for those that know the multitudes of struggles, you gotta feed your family first, then you gotta figure out how to fix your health. There are levels of survival we need before others in order to move forward, and those are the hard everyday choices. They also have bought and paid our politicians. And so no matter how many people we get to go to our legislators, they're artificially inflating economic gain, they're not listening to the real issues of the people. And this isn't isolated. This happens in cities too, and I know there are folks here. But in rural communities, it is isolating to do this work. And to find access to support is really difficult. And so as an example, I started organizing, or what I now commonly refer to as like very angrily yelling at a coal company, for 5 years. I was the only one, I thought, in my entire community that hated coal. I was the only one in my entire community that I thought cared about the future. And for 5 years, I didn't even know the Center for Coalfield Justice existed. And this was all in the late 2000s, and our organization was founded in 1994. And so once I happened by coincidence to find the organization, I got introduced to this community, to this place that I now call my family, that I feel honored to be the director of. And it was life-changing for me to be connected to that family. And so at the root of what our organization does is create those spaces to build community together. And from those spaces we provide, we've had major wins. So I talked a lot about doom and gloom. We've had some major wins in our town. We've had mine workers demand that a company reinstate their health care. We've stopped infrastructure projects. That same stream that's going to be impacted, we stopped mining from going under it twice. But we also realized in the long term we can't win alone. And so I started getting more connected in the city of Pittsburgh. What's the environmental organizing happening here? And to be brutally honest, in the first 5-6 years of my life doing that, it was very one-way transactional. They wanted us to come up to check off a box that a frontline community member spoke at their rally, was on their panel, we're doing our due diligence, we're being equitable, but we're not. And so when we needed help from the city to come down to help us with a fight, nobody showed up. So we stopped coming to Pittsburgh because that's not how relationships work. And so that was a point for me that was instrumental in realizing that environmental justice is very intersectional. So you might hear more about environmental justice after or throughout this panel. We heard Mustafa Ali talk about it a lot. And it doesn't exist in a silo. It is connected very deeply to racism, to sexism, to classism, and the root cause that drives all of those is capitalism. Capitalism doesn't work if it's not pitting our communities against each other. Capitalism doesn't work if it's not putting the poor class against the working class, if it's not putting white folks against black folks. It doesn't work without that. And so the challenge I want to put out is, what does a Pittsburgh look like, or what does a region look like without capitalism in the future? And so because I'm here today, I didn't cancel, even with all of the struggles my community is going back home, because I feel very passionately that we've got to build this bridge between Pittsburgh and the outside region. And almost Pittsburgh's survival depends upon it more than ours does, because we're doing this fight in the region whether or not the city's at the table. But it's not, and so some of the great organizing in Pittsburgh that's happened is Pittsburgh's the first city to pass a ban on fracking anywhere. And that has led a trend moving forward. Pittsburgh just committed to 100% renewable energy. But this is what surrounds Pittsburgh in terms of fracking. And this doesn't have the cracker plant that's going to be a major air source pollution. Greene County is the largest coal supplier in the state. We produce 30 to 40 million tons of coal a year. And so even if the city becomes the most sustainable place, has the best systems, pollution is still going to impact you, because water and air pollution, they don't respect boundaries. They don't respect these artificial lines politicians draw somewhere, and we can't respect them anymore either. And so borders need to not exist in our future. And we need to break our cultural resistance to leave one neighborhood to the next, to cross 2 bridges in one day, which I heard a lot about last night at dinner. And so that's going to be critical, and that has led us to start to do some of this organizing. And so this is a picture of environmental justice community here in the city of Pittsburgh at that same coal preparation plant, where we took them down. We had them meet with our community members. We shared stories about what each community is going through. They got to see extraction firsthand for the first time. And it was transformational for rural white folks to talk with urban black folks and realize that their struggles are really not that different. And that it's the same systems perpetuating the harm over and over and over again. And so this is a banner we actually used at an action a little bit north of here in Lawrence County, where we were trying to stop Shell from drilling a well on an organic pig farmer. And it was about bridging this rural-urban divide. And so we're all in this together, whether or not we want to believe it. And our survival depends upon it, not just for clean air and clean water, but building political power, destroying entire systems and rebuilding them so that they work for everybody. And that's the hard work that we have to do. And so I just want to challenge the room right now before I leave the stage. And there's a lot of privilege and power sitting in this room. And so if you're one of those people that has that privilege, has that power, has that wealth, imagine what your community looks like if you redistribute that, if you give that up, if you share it. But there's also folks in here who are fighting to have access to that power and wealth. So for you all, imagine what your communities look like if you start to get that. You start to get that power, you start to get that wealth. Redistribution is going to have to happen. One of our previous speakers said, we're not living in a scarcity, we just don't have equally distributed power and wealth. And that's what we have to move towards. And that's what I'm really excited with our organization and some of our partners. And I just want to give a shout out in the room to Pittsburgh United, that we're doing some cool transformational relationship work in rural communities that I believe is really going to build our communities collectively regional to be able to create a system that works for everybody, and a system where profits are not put over people or places. Thank you.